What I just done read.
Welcome back to my Bohemian Book Corner. My name is Max, and this is What I Done Just Read, a book review show where I have a list, my list here that I have compiled of books that I've been meaning to read for quite some time, and this is a way of making me get around to actually doing them, and also just gives me a chance to share my thoughts on the books on the list and give recommendations where I feel they are due. Today we will be looking at the 27th Pan Book of Horror Stories, but before we come on to that, we do have the business of our Word of the Day. And keeping in theme with this being obviously a horror-based episode, if you're a writer and you want to set the scene for the night that your mad scientist creates his monster, and you want to say that it was a dark and misty night, then you could save yourself a few words by using the single word version of it, which is caliginous, which is a wonderful word, which means dark or misty or obscured. We get it in English from the French word caligino, which itself comes from the Latin root caliginosus, which means misty, or there's two other versions of it in Latin, caligio or caligian, which means mistiness. I love it. It's only a word that I've discovered recently, but while a dark and stormy night or a dark and misty night is factual, as very descriptive about what's happening, I find caliginous is like sublime. It's a word with nuance to it. You know, the reader can add what they want to it. So, please take it out there, make it your own. When I was doing some research for this, and including it in this episode, I found a little graph that showed that there's been a slight resurgence in its usage since about 2019. So now would be a good time to jump on the bandwagon, as it were, and give it some fresh tongue. Yeah. I'm going to have a drink, excuse me. Hang on. Okay, so the book itself, the 27th Pan Book of Horror Stories, which was released in 1986 and edited or selected by Clarence Paget. Bit of history and a bit of a personal history on the series itself. I started collecting these, I think about 2008, 2009, after I'd not been long back in Norfolk, and I happened to pop back to my hometown of Wyndham. And while I was there, I stopped into a second-hand bookshop that I used to frequent quite a lot as a kid, which I was surprised to find was still open and still being run by the same guy. And obviously while I was there, I was like, I should really take something away and give something a new home while I'm here. And that was the 20th Pan Book of Horror Stories. So I took this home, read it, and after doing so... Oh, hello, what's this? I'd forgotten that was in there. Oh, that is fantastic. So that is a slightly strange chimera created by my good friend Jonathan Took. I'm sure he'll appreciate that being shown to the world. Yeah, that didn't come with the book. But yes, after it, I'd suddenly realised that it had been a while since I'd done any kind of book collection. I think the last series of books that I'd collected was the complete works of Sherlock Holmes. And I figured, well, why not? I'm a horror fan. This is kind of the de facto horror short story anthology series, so why not give them a look and see if I can get the whole set. And as you can see, as I said last time, I have put them all out here. This is where we're up to date. The series itself was started by writer and editor Herbert Van Thal in 1959, and they released a volume every year for 30 years. Even though Van Thal himself passed away after the release of the 24th Book of Horror Stories, although they did keep his name as the selector on the cover for the 25th, because he'd already made his selections for the next volume before he passed away. After that, it was picked up by his co-worker and co-editor, Clarence Paget, who, as far as I know, did the rest of them. And I mean, the books themselves have been an inspiration, I think, for a lot of people, myself included. I've seen a number of other, whether they're books or even stuff I found on YouTube, sometimes that will do a parody of the style of the cover for these. It's something that I actually did myself with my own book, Book of Squalor, which is a collection of short horror stories. As you can see, there are loose similarities between them. Obviously not quite as explicit as this one in terms of the cover art itself, but obviously, if you don't want to give it a look, then it is available from our website. Link will be in the description below. Screw it. First 5 people who buy a print copy over the next month, I will send them a signed copy as well. There are 12 stories in here, ranging from regulars to the series, like Harry E. Turner, Alan Templey, there's another one as well. Yeah, Norman P. Kaufman, who have stories that appear in quite a few of these. Then there's occasional contributors, including in this one Stephen King, although I'll touch on to that a bit more in a bit. To try and make this review, or rather to make this review a bit easier for me, I tried initially when I was going through it and making my notes to break them down into 3 categories, which was going to be good, bad, and mediocre. What I actually ended up with was good, bad, and needless gratuitous torture porn. With a subcategory of feminist cannibalistic torture porn. Which, we'll come on to that in a moment. Okay, so we'll look at the bad first of all. I'd probably say the worst one in here is a story called Red Recipe by Ray Askey, which isn't particularly long. And the setup and the background of the story, it's a bit prosaic. There's nothing really new or original about it. The fact that something horrible is going to happen to somebody is telegraphed quite badly, and then we get to the torture porn part of it, which, I don't know, maybe at the time you kind of read that and kind of going, ugh. But certainly reading it in 2022, there's nothing special about it. The other one that I didn't particularly enjoy is called Spiders by Buzz Dixon. There's a too much of a convenience of coincidence. It's another story about a guy with arachnophobia being terrorised by an infestation of black widows in his house. What I did find most interesting, though, when I was doing a bit of research on Buzz Dixon himself, apparently had quite an illustrious career. I say had. He's still alive, as a screenwriter, but also as a comic book writer as well, including doing a stint on Spider-Man, including doing a story of Spider-Man versus the supervillain Tarantula, which kind of makes things a little one note here. In terms of the torture porn stories now, I mean, there's, again, while doing my research for this, there's an interesting article. I think it may have been part of an introduction to a re-release of the original first Pound Book of Horror. It's there, I can't bother. Where an author by the name of Chris Massey wrote a bit of an article on it and cites some interesting points. And one of them is this inclusion of so many stories that devolve and resort to torture porn as the expression of use, so I'm going to keep using it. Hopefully YouTube isn't going to mark me down for gratuitous use of porn. The word, of course. Sorry. Yes, but it was interesting that at this stage, by the time we got to the 27th book, its reception by a reading audience had dwindled. And it was felt that a lot of these stories were included as a way, as kind of like shock therapy to try and reinvigorate, you know what I mean, the franchise. And it had almost the opposite effect. And a lot of readers turned off from it, partly because of that. And as Chris quite rightly cites himself, it's a curious thing to note that in 1986, when this came out, that wasn't what people wanted from their horror anthologies. But when you wind forward about 15 years or so, when you get into the release of things like Saw and Hostel and torture porn in movies, and all of the clones that came after them, that shift in what the audience wants. And obviously the shift there, the difference there between a reading audience and a movie audience. I mean, personally, with the exception of those two that are cited there, most of those things are kind of like, okay, yeah, that's some brilliant special effects. I don't know, you'd hope that you'd get a bit more depth from it in a book, with that a lot more personal connection that you have between reader and story, but I think Chris was quite right that they didn't really do any good, and curiously enough, it's not any of those stories that I found that I really engaged and enjoyed. Of the other stories, I mean, certainly Red Recipe also drops into the torture porn category as well. Of the ones that are not in there, or rather the ones that drop into my subcategory of feminist cannibalist, that's too many ists, feminist cannibal torture porn, there are two stories that kind of touch on that, and they're quite close together in the running order, which kind of bashes you over the head a bit too much with it, and it's just like, oh God, please let there not be any more. The two in question are Pebbledine by Alan Temperley and Ms. Rita and the Professor by Harry E. Turner. As I mentioned, they're two very regular writers for the series. Pebbledine is probably the one I was most disappointed with. It's not that it's a bad story, it's a really good and well-written story, and I'm not surprised because Alan Temperley is a fantastic writer. In fact, he's also the author of one of the few stories that I can absolutely 100% say yes, because it's in volume 23, which is called Kolongo Plaything, which is a fantastic and very disturbing story. And I was like, fantastic, it's the same guy, and the quality and the craftsmanship of the writing of Pebbledine is just as good. It's just... it's one of those stories that has that air about it that it's a fait accompli from the word go. And certainly by the time you get to the ending of it, it feels, to quote from my friend Rob, it feels like you got bored and went down the pub and finished it on the back of a beer mat. Which is a real shame, it really is. Because the slow pacing, the build-up and everything on it, the characterizations are fantastic. And then it just wraps itself up in a page and a half. And as it's the longest story in the collection, it felt like it was doing a real disservice to everything else that had come before. Ms. Rita and the Professor is a short story. Out of the two that fall into this category, it's the one I think I preferred. Not that the story is I wouldn't say it's as well written as Pebbledine, but the author allows his protagonist to have a bit more agency in the story than I felt that Danny, the protagonist in Pebbledine, gets. You've got a sleazy Fleet Street journalist investigating the relationship between an aggressive feminist called Ms. Rita and a kind of paragon of academia, the Professor, and leads to some horrible, horrible things. But it felt like the character had a lot more say in deciding his fate in the story, and that's why I preferred that of the two. There's another story which again would fall into the torture porn category, medium rare, which was just a bit, that's a horrible thing. And that's all you can really say about it. It is interesting to note, based on what I was just saying there as well, that over the course of this series, while the early volumes included a lot of historical short stories, and Herbert Van Thal was very much trying to reinvigorate the careers of forgotten writers. As the series moved on and progressed, and certainly by the time we get to the point where Clarence Paget takes over, there's more of an inclusion of stories that are more contemporary. With the exception, I think, of two, including the story by Stephen King, all of the rest were written in the same year or within a year of this volume coming out. Which I find fascinating about the series as a whole, that you do get to see that subtle shift in trends within horror over the course of the run. As to the stories that made it into the good category, there's 7 of them in total. I'm not going to go through all of them. There will be a list here somewhere of all of those stories, and I'll just talk about a couple of them. I will make a quick mention of the Stephen King story, I Know What You Need. It's not a bad story. I liked it, I enjoyed it. I don't know whether it's horror. It feels more like psychological. It feels more in the same way that they kind of would classify something like I don't know, The Omen, like a psychological thriller. It feels more like that, with just an element of shine to it. So let's put it that way. That's probably a nice way to put it. And it was included in here again as a way of reinvigorating the series. The problem with that was that the story was written in the 70s and had already appeared in Stephen King's own anthology, Night Shift. So why would you buy this with a lot of stuff that you may not know when you can get it and get loads more by the same guy? Again, as I said, yeah, it was okay. I enjoyed it. It wasn't too bad. But the only other ones that I really want to talk about are my two favourites. The two standout stories in this volume. First one is the first story, On the Fisherman's Path, by Chris Barnum, which follows the adventures of a young man who's just finished uni, not taking a gap year, just like a gap summer. He's travelling around Europe and keeps running into this young woman. And there's other events going on in the background as well. And it's fantastic. It's a fantastic introduction to this volume. It's very well paced, and you can tell that the author has first-hand knowledge and must have seen a lot of the places around Europe that he's describing, because the detail is wonderful and really adds to the atmosphere of the story. And there's a wonderful mystery in the background with it as well, which the narrator, is written in first person, drip feeds you just the right amount, and it's a really good story. I do recommend it. But I'd say my standout favourite for this one is the penultimate story, The House That Remembered, by Jonathan Cruz. This ticks all the boxes as a classic haunted house ghost story. It is about a young American couple, newlyweds. The husband is from an old Irish family line and has recently inherited the family pile in the country, back in the old country. And it's fantastic. It's a pile of rubble on the top of a hill overlooking a rustic Irish village. And I mean, what more do you need in a ghost story? And obviously he gets there and gets these warnings not to go up to the house on when the night is caliginous. That's not in the story, that's just me. And what resolves and plays out then is a mystery dating back to before the house was destroyed by fire, all of these kind of things. And there's some wonderful elements in it. Of all of the stories in this, that's one that I would very much like to recommend to either of my friends, to either Ian Gordon from Horror Babble or to Jasper Lestrange from Encrypted, because I would love to see what either of you could do with that story. As long as you can get the rights to it, but I'd love to hear an audio version of it. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Yeah, I wasn't too sure when I started, because a lot of the stories that I didn't like are very early in the running order. But overall, I mean, as I said, out of the 12 stories, 7 of them made my good list. So, I mean, yeah, it's a reasonable entry into the series. If you're a horror fan, if you're a fan of horror history as well, it's worth giving it a look and seeing what you make of it. Obviously, if you are going to do what I did and go, I should get the whole set, then please wait, I've only got 3 more to get. So once I've got the other 3, then you can start getting yours. Okay? Got a deal? Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay, anyway. Next things next, we need to go to the compulsory jar of eyes. I have got the space ready for it. So I'm going to take these. And again, as it is horror themed, all I'm going to say is, I'll be right back. And we are back. Okay, so let's have a look, and the verdict is on this. There we go. So I was considering giving in terms of as a book itself, just to be a little bit more critical, because I seem to be quite critical. Not on purpose. I was going to give it like the second smallest I, but on reflection, as I said, I did like over half of the stories in the volume. It seems fair to give it the standard I in terms of its quality as a book. In terms of the actual product itself, it does get the very big I. I mean, yes, okay, this particular volume has got a little bit of water damage on it, and the print is a little small, but just look at the cover. I mean, how can you not? With that kind of balls in terms of the artwork, how can you not get the biggest I possible? I'm sure you'd agree. What am I doing? This can now go on the shelf with the others. There we go. And no doubt, when I get the next one, as I should have really said at the start, I'm in no particular hurry as to complete my collection, but we'll get around to it. So, next thing is then obviously we go to the list. So as you can see, there we go. Pan 27 is off the list. Woohoo! Just before we look at what's coming up next, on my list there's a few on here where I've marked authors without actually having chosen a story of theirs or a book of theirs that I want to read. So I'm thinking about throwing it open to you. I will pick one of the authors and you give me your suggestions as to who or which of their works I should look at. Whichever few come up, I will put into a poll for a later episode, and then whichever one wins is the one that I will read. So I think from looking at the list here, let's go to the bottom. So give us some suggestions of novels by Kurt Vonnegut. Would be great. Thank you. As to the next book on our list, we have The Day of the Locust by Nathaniel West. I must admit, I have already started this, and I'm about halfway through it already, because, you'll have to find out what I think of it next time, won't you? I think that would be the perfect moment for you to get thee gone, back into the lovely, gorgeous weather. That's what I'm intending to do. With my book, of course. And I shall see you next time. He is from an old Irish family line and has inherited the family part.